Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrient Ag Solutions, and I want to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Well, with the formation of Tropical Storm Faye, which followed right here along this path, we have now had our sixth named tropical system of the year. Now, in terms of activity, this is the quickest we've ever made it to the sixth name on record. But where we stand in the current hurricane season is only right here, meaning that we still have the bulk of the hurricane season still ahead of us. Later on in this video, I'll be talking with you about the conditions that are coming together later on in August, September, and October, especially with La Nina, so sit tight, we're going to talk about that. But first, let's take a look at the total rainfall we did get over the last week. You can see the influence of Faye's path going from Texas all the way over to the Carolinas, but the bulk of the heaviest rain came offshore here before cutting back into the into the Northeast, where we did bring in quite a bit of heavier rainfall into the drought-stricken parts of the Northeast. But if we look right in here at North Carolina, we can see the heavier rainfall that was anticipated in the southern part of the state, where anywhere between an inch and upwards of 3 inches of rain fell as you got down toward the coast, even higher precipitation amounts. But the models did not capture very well what was going to be happening here in the northeastern part of the state or over toward the mountains, because we had forecast this from the European model last week. And so we overestimated precipitation here and got the southern part of the state right and probably overestimated a little bit farther to the north as well. But it was a tricky forecast trying to pick out exactly where Faye was going to go. Now, what I'd like to do here next is I want to give you a bit more of a macro scale view of things across the United States, because certainly this morning on Monday I was up watching the markets early and we've seen quite a bit of change, and I want to talk about why that is. First of all, in the northern plains of the United States, getting back into the parts of the Pacific Northwest, very, very wet conditions, and this extends up into the Canadian prairies as well. But there are pockets of drought we have to be talking about in the United States. If we go from west to east, I'm going to specifically see this region here in parts of Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado. This area is some prime corn and soybean ground in this part of Iowa. We're now starting to see the resurgence of drought in southern Texas, and the whole of the eastern Corn Belt right now still spotted with drought areas, even after some what would be considered decent rainfall this weekend. Now go over to North Carolina and just kind of get a good view there. There are pockets where under some of the heavier thunderstorms, we're sitting over the last 2 weeks between 150 and 250% of normal on rainfall. Again, those places that got hit with those heavier storms. But there are also places that, even despite 3 weeks ago, remember that big cutoff low that brought in the flooding rains to not only North Carolina but Virginia? Well, some of those spots have now gone back over dry. And, you know, I often talk to some of my friends in North Carolina, and they always tell me we're always a week away from drought. And it certainly feels that way with the kind of spotty nature of some of the storms that we've had as of late. Now, since we're talking about storms, since the 9th, much of the central part of the United States has experienced a lot of severe weather. I want to show you some of those nasty storms that went out of Minnesota through Iowa and Illinois on Saturday. The video on the right is from a place called Janesville, Minnesota, and it's right there where this arrow is located right here. And some of the winds that came through this region produced some major crop damage. Those same storms made it through Illinois later, and as they did so, came through and laid a lot of our corn down just like this. Now, I don't yet have an acreage number on how much was damaged, but right now I'm telling you, I've seen an enormous amount of prime farm ground in the mid part of the country that got hit hard by these winds, and I don't know what the recovery is going to look like. They also got hit by quite a bit of hail. This is a maximum estimated hail size map that goes back to the 10th through early in the morning on the 13th, and what it shows you is from pea-sized hail down here all the way up to grapefruit-sized hail, which is at the top of this color bar. Zooming in on the midsection of the United States, we have round 1 of storms and round 2. In fact, I got those backwards. This was the first round over here. And as that came through, it produced some huge hail in Rapid City, South Dakota. That hailstone there over 3 inches in diameter. And getting into central Nebraska, look at the damage to Casey's field here. She went out and got some pictures of just an incredible amount of hail destruction. So it's been an extremely stormy week in the midsection of the United States, and a lot of crop damage has been done. Now, if you were keeping up with what was going on, especially in the corn and soybean markets, there was a lot of discussion last week at the the potential for a broad sector of the country to experience excessive heat. In fact, an area in through here which had a very high risk of excessive heat as we work our way into this week and next week. But over the weekend, things changed a bit, and the risk of these hazardous temperatures in the latest update from the Climate Prediction Center from the end of last week has now backed off on the heat in the midsection of the country, at least the dangerously hot stuff, and started to increase temperatures over in the Carolinas. Now, up early this morning watching the markets open, actually late last night through early this morning, we certainly saw a weather reaction in the markets. And I'm not claiming to be a market expert, but I'm just saying, talked to several colleagues early this morning, and certainly this pullback in the prices was due to the fact that not only did things come in less hot, but also wetter in the midsection of the country as well. And if you might want to ask why, I want to give you an answer, okay? This is some really cool meteorology here. This shows you how important it is to watch for very subtle shifts in the jet stream. You see, a week ago, back on the 9th, when we were, not a week ago, but last week, we were forecasting the jet stream to look like this by the time we got to this Wednesday night, with a trough sitting here and a broad ridge extending from southern Illinois to Texas. That meant a front was going to try to come through between the two of these, but not really be able to make it too far to the south. Well, this is the latest model update for that same time period. This is now Wednesday evening. Much deeper trough here, and our ridge is really broadened out. Therefore, the front makes it farther to the south, and much more precipitation comes in on it. As we look out to our old forecast from last week on July the 9th, for this upcoming Saturday night, we were expecting a huge ridge to extend in this area. That was the excessive heat we were just talking about. Here's the new forecast. See the trough coming in here? That ridge is now considerably smaller. So the difference here is in the subtle features and how they can change. Well, we often can't even predict them more than about 7 or 8 days out in advance. So a really challenging forecast here mid-season. So I'm going to start showing you a new set of graphics throughout the rest of this summer. And this is especially good for you corn farmers in North Carolina. This is a map that shows accumulated stress degree days. Now, we've all heard of growing degree days. This is a stress degree day. I'm counting how often the temperature gets above 86 degrees Fahrenheit. It turns out some research done by Elwyn Taylor would tell us that if we're able to accumulate more than 140 of these stress degree day units by the time the corn is done going through pollination, then we will see significant yield loss. So I color code in green everything that's less than 140 units, and in reds everything that's above. So you can clearly see as I've been talking that the main stresses on the heat are here in the South Central Plains, and we in North Carolina are not yet to that stress level. Now, I got asked to do some comparisons, so I'd like to at least show you some of the crazy years for this index. This is what the stress degree day map looked like through July 11th. So the data that I have today are through July 11th, but this was for 2012. So you can see we had already been up here where our numbers in North Carolina were sitting between 200 and 250 stress degree day units, which is way above what we would want to see for our corn. So again, this is this year. Let's compare it to another year. How about 2011? That was also a year where we saw extreme heat in the southern plains that moved through the southern United States up here into the Carolinas. So this is a year where we've not seen a lot of heat stress in the Carolinas, nor for the rest of the Corn Belt. It seems to be back in the southern plains. We're going to keep an eye on it. And that's where our extreme heat is today. There is excessive heat watches and warnings out for much of the lower part of the Delta, getting over into Texas and New Mexico, and fire warnings west of that. We've got nothing here for us in the Carolinas today, which is good. So let's see how this pattern is going to evolve to see what kind of stresses we have to watch out for. You'll notice in this animation multiple troughs sweep through the Canadian prairies. You'll also see a broad ridge kind of extending out across the central United States, but it tends to, at the end of this animation, which means the end of July, retreat back to the west. And that's going to be a critical component to this upcoming temperature and precipitation forecast. So I think we should talk temperatures first. You're going to be seeing in this forecast multiple days in the South Central Plains of triple-digit heat. But in the Carolinas, well, take a look at how things start off today. This is very, very close to average. As we play this forward, our high temperatures throughout this week remain at the beginning of the week in the lower 90s. As we get toward the middle of the week, we start to see some mid-90s creeping up, so 92, 93, 94, those kind of temperatures. But as the weekend arrives, all the heat builds back into the Corn Belt, back into the Great Lakes states. We tend to stay right on our average. We're talking low 90s for highs throughout much of this week. So when does that heat start to build in? Well, it doesn't seem to want to get here until next week. And I'm going to talk about that in just a few moments. So with that particular setup, what are we anticipating in terms of precipitation this week first? We're going to be seeing this weak frontal boundary kind of slide through the Corn Belt. And as it does so, it brings in precipitation chances through the Corn Belt initially. Some very critical rains. Remember, we're keeping this macro scale view of things here in Iowa. So you corn and soybean farmers in North Carolina, this is one of the other reasons why we saw some movement down in the markets this morning. Now, what we're anticipating is that what's left of that front will finally make it over here toward the Carolinas toward the end of the week. So we're going to be seeing daily chances of showers and thunderstorms this week, but then toward the end of the week, we could get increased chances of precipitation. But notice the colors here are showing relatively lighter amounts, generally between a quarter and a half inch of rainfall. And then as you get over here toward this section, North Carolina, maybe upwards of an inch to an inch and a half. That's what we're looking at in terms of total precip. So I want to show you the operational European model because it's a bit drier through next week. You can see here just hit or miss scattered storms is all that it's got kind of on the docket here for North Carolina throughout this next week. So you see a lot of numbers here, relatively small precipitation amounts forecast through next Monday. Are we anticipating any severe weather? Well, certainly over the next couple of days, the main severe weather threat is going to be in the plains. But throughout today, we do have a general risk of thunderstorms. About the probability of them occurring is about 20 to 40%. But you do see that today, tomorrow, and again on Wednesday, general thunderstorm risk across the area. Things will be stagnant this week. I'm looking at 3 maps on the bottom here, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, looking at midday wind speeds. And it's going to be calm winds, maybe at times getting up to 5 miles an hour, but very calm and stagnant week here as our temperatures hover in the low 90s. So let's watch when the precipitation does get here by looking at the European model. All right, you saw just as I animated that the front that comes through the Corn Belt, see it there? Now, in the meantime, before that gets here, throughout the day today on Monday, getting into Monday afternoon and evening, do you see the widely scattered showers and storms here on the heat of the day? We do see that. As we work our way into the overnight hours on Monday into Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon and evening, again, chances here about 20 to 30% chance of seeing some scattered showers and thunderstorms. As we work our way into the day on Wednesday, now the front is advancing through the Corn Belt here, and it's going to be slowly moving toward us by Wednesday evening. Again, widely scattered showers and thunderstorms here, a lot of hit or miss storms. It won't be until that frontal boundary, see, it's still sitting here Thursday morning. It won't be until that frontal boundary gets here until Friday morning, afternoon, and evening, there it is, that we have better chances of seeing storms. So again, this would be at the end of the week and the start of our weekend, maybe better chances at seeing some storms producing some heavy rain. But remember, it's summertime and there's no reduction overall in the total precipitable water sitting over North Carolina. So any of these thunderstorms that pop up could potentially put down an inch of rain very, very quickly. But we just noticed that by the end of the week, as that frontal boundary gets here, we do have better chances of seeing more widely scattered showers and thunderstorms. But that's it. Good news is nothing is blocking off the Atlantic. Nothing's blocking off the Gulf of Mexico. So we're going to see quite a bit of moisture in the atmosphere over this area. And that's maybe better seen here when we look out at week number 2, July 20th through the 27th. With the ridge retreating, okay, starting here and then moving to the west, we're going to get this ring of fire precipitation setup coming over the edge. Now, a lot of times when we see ring of fire type setups, this is where we get this ring of storms around this high pressure cell, we tend to get these squall lines that come blasting through North Carolina. So we're going to be on the lookout for that as we work our way into week 2. But I'll give you another update about that next Monday to see if that's still going to be in the forecast as we get ourselves into the end of the month of July. Now, back to those temperatures. You saw that once we got through this week, we started to see a bit of a rebound back over toward warmer temperatures. In the 6 to 10 day forecast, you can start to see that slight warm up here showing up, which means now we're getting into next week where we're talking about some mid-90s temperatures. And as we look out farther toward the end of this month, there is one good thing. The subtropical high is sitting here. It's way off the map. So the flow around us just keeps bringing moisture out of the Atlantic. It brings moisture out of the Gulf of Mexico. And as a result, we're going to continue to see the stormy and hot pattern continue. So while triple digits sit over here in the Central Plains, we're going to be seeing a lot of low to mid 90s in North Carolina as we progress through the end of this month, which gets us back on track for more normal temperatures, even above normal temperatures as we progress forward, all right? Bigger picture things. Right now, looking at this map of global sea surface temperature anomalies, there are a few things to point out. It's still very warm in the North Pacific and also warm in the main development region, which means anything coming off of Africa will be sitting on very warm water coming over toward the Lesser Antilles or out of the Gulf or out of the Caribbean. So there's plenty of warm water. Where the water has not been able to stay cooled off has been here in Nino region 3.4. And that's why right now we have actually seen that area go back over toward positive temperature anomalies. The Indian Ocean is warm. And over Siberia, we have seen very, very hot temperatures and the lowest sea ice extent measured since 1979, which is the beginning of our satellite era. So sea ice up in this area right up here is extremely low. And all of this points to keeping our jet stream a bit farther to the north. We've got other problems going on in the tropics as well. Major loss of momentum we talked about last week, well, that's continuing. We see that the North Pacific is also still seeing near average to below average momentum, which means the jet stream is weak and it's north and it's not moving fast. We're not getting good transport of energy out of the tropics to crank the thing back up again. And we're just waffling around with this strange pattern in the Central Pacific. This La Nina tries to get going, but it's really not able to. You see a little cooler water, but look, the Southern Oscillation Index is down here around -8. That's El Nino-like numbers. And yeah, it recovered back up to -2, but to be La Nina, we've got to see this way higher, like +5, 6, 7. We do at least notice some stronger trade winds, so the winds are going across the Pacific stronger as of late, but this is most likely because we're finally dislodging the MJO. Now, when you look at this diagram, for the last 40 days, the Madden-Julian Oscillation has just been sitting over here in phase 1. It's this standing wave over Africa. Well, it's finally moving east, which means the MJO is coming out into phase 2 and 3, and it may take a while, but it could go all the way around like this. We're going to have to watch that carefully. This would dislodge this permanent, or well, not permanent, but semi-permanent stuck phase of the MJO and get things churning again in the tropics, which will be something important for us to watch later on this hurricane season. Now, since we're talking about hurricanes, nothing over the next 5 days, but we're now at that time of year where we have to be watching the west coast of Africa for any easterly waves to be emerging in that area. So we're going to watch this extremely carefully. Now, real quickly, before I go away from this image, I want to point out a couple of things. If we watch this animation again, which is rainfall over the last week as measured by satellite, there's big time flooding in this part of China, and that's hit some productive ground in southern China. We did get some needed rains in parts of Ukraine over the last week, and they're going to go over cooler and wetter through the next 10 days. But thankfully, no tropical systems are right now forecast in the next 5 to 7 days to come out of the main development region for our hurricanes over here. But remember, the bulk of this hurricane season is still ahead of us. So one last thing I want to finish up with. This is the new data released for August, September, and October in terms of precipitation rate anomalies from the National Multimodal Ensemble. And what I want to point out is, once again, this area right over here is still showing up very wet in the models, meaning this weak La Nina that's over here is possibly continuing to keep wind shear low in the main development region for hurricanes. So we start with hurricanes in this video and we end with hurricanes in this video. Just want to let you know that we are still forecasting near average to above average hurricane season. And if that high pressure cell stays farther to the east, the better the news is for keeping our tracks on hurricanes farther away from the coastline here. But if it shoves it at all to the west, that will help direct these systems right into the coast. So we got a lot to be watching here. I look forward to giving you updates each week. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you next Monday. Thank you.